Yes. Okay, someone else wants to be in the intro.
I'm gonna put her into the camera. It was a big week for Magic the Gathering. We had spoilers, new leaks, pro tournaments, and big price swings. There's a lot to cover, so let's dive into it on this week's Upkeep. This week we saw the reveal of Final Fantasy and Tarkir Dragonstorm as the next two sets coming to Magic. There's been a lot of hype around these, and both the reception for each was very positive, if I would say. The older players really connecting with Tarkir being this callback to Khans of Tarkir, which was one of the most beloved sets in Magic, and the newer players really connecting with Final Fantasy. So much so that I ended up seeing a lot of Final Fantasy content lead into their main communities. So on the Final Fantasy subreddit, there were a lot of Magic posts, same with Twitter and a few other spaces. It's honestly really fun to see different communities sort of interact for the first time. If you're one of those new players, welcome. It's good to have you here. I'm going to try and give you a run through of what you can expect in Final Fantasy. Unfortunately, if you're planning on pre-ordering, it looks like prices for that have spiked massively in just 24 hours. Prices went to some of the highest I think I've ever seen in collector boosters, which is where you get all the shiny bling. The precons too, I suspect are going to be really hard to get. All of the precons have also been revealed with 4 different face commanders you're going to get to use. Honestly, as a new player, they'd probably be one of your best starting points if you're looking to get into the game. For my money, the Esper precon with the cat girl in it, don't know her name, sorry. That one I think will be arguably one of the most powerful commanders we've ever seen since maybe Nadu. She seems like she goes really well with a lot of discounted spells and can absolutely terrorize games. I expect her to be particularly popular, though I think all of them have their own fan base dedicated to them. For the more veteran players and the dragon enthusiasts, Tarkir Dragonstorm also was revealed. Fitted to the name, we got a dragon with Storm on it. Haven't seen Storm in some time in a standard set. There's a whole thing called the Storm Scale, named after the fact that they don't really print certain keywords into standard, but we're getting Storm back. Maybe even more excitingly, we're getting a brand new Moxen, specifically for dragons. I'm personally very excited to try and get it banned from multiple formats, given the reputation that Moxen have. We also got a new keyword in Behold that cares about showing various things, and the example they give with the Sarkhan card they showed, that you can behold a dragon. That could be a dragon in your hand or on the battlefield. I expect we'll see more of this in the future. We already kind of have an equivalent with the lands already in Commander, where you show a land that's a forest or a plains and it comes in untapped, so I think this is really just a keyword to represent that mechanic. If that wasn't enough to really get the MTG boomers excited, we also have a reprint of Siege Rhino, or rather a new version of it. This one's a little bit cheaper, has less stats and does a little bit less damage, but I think it's arguably better, and it may have a home in modern day standard, and I'm sure lots of players will be keen to try and bring our new Rhino friend into the format. Wizards also revealed the last set of the year. It may have been one of the worst kept secrets, but now we have official confirmation that Avatar: The Last Airbender will be the last set of the year. We didn't get any new cards revealed for this, but we did get a bunch of artwork. The leading theory I've seen for this is that there will be a commander deck for each element, leaving black out. So 4 precons, 1 for each of the main colors and each of the elements in Avatar. That definitely makes the most sense to me. I'll be interested to see how they represent black though. They obviously can't print a set without a whole color, though it might just be the sort of villain color. So maybe Firelord Ozai will be red-black, Azula might be the same. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Then in other news, last weekend was the first Pro Tour since Aether Drift release. This is sort of the best chance we've had to have a look at how good the new cards are to the pro players. The standout card of this scene was a new card called Ride's End. 5 mana removal spell that saw a lot of play, particularly in a lot of the decks that top aided and including the winner of the deck. You might ask why this card is the top performer over some splashy rare or mythic. Well, its expensive mana cost is important because there is another card that cares about this. It's Up the Beanstalk. If you're a standard player already, you might sigh hearing me mention this card because Up the Beanstalk absolutely dominated this weekend. Domain Ramp was the winning deck, winning in the final against Domain Ramp. It was a mirror match where both decks got Up the Beanstalk out and attempted to bring in the Overlords and smash each other in the face. Bit of a grindy match, not particularly enjoyable to watch if I'm being honest. Domain is a bit dirtily and a bit difficult to track track when you're watching it in a screen, but it is undoubtedly a very powerful archetype. The card Ride's End has given Domain the ability to effectively patch up one of its weaker matchups, which was the aggro decks that were trying to kill it before it got going. This was pretty much Domain's blind spot. If it was allowed to get its game plan going, not really anything could stop it. Its victory on the weekend has prompted quite a few people to ask if maybe it's time to ban Up the Beanstalk. For context, Domain has pretty much been front and center since Up the Beanstalk was printed. Before the Overlords, it was running Atraxa. It still runs Leyline Binding to remove any type of permanent and trigger Up the Beanstalk. The question here remains, is it finally time for a ban? The deck has existed for a better part of 2 years. It might be time soon for the first ever ban watch on this channel. I'll be very interested to do that. Outside of Domain being the top deck, Wizards did write us a nice article detailing a few of the new decks or new cards popping up in decks. Among them was a few Monument to Endurances, Bright Glass Gearhulk popped up, and there was even a deck utilizing a few speed mechanics. Unfortunately though, none of these decks managed to crack the top 100. It was purely dominated by Esper Pixie, Domain, and Grulmice, effectively. There was a Golgari list that did manage to crack the top 8, running Molt Tender and some heavy self-mill. Ironically, this deck also tried to take advantage of Up the Beanstalk by playing it with expensive creatures like the new Chitin Gravestalker, which can have its cost reduced. The window for Wizards to ban cards is in a few weeks, so it may be time for Up the Beanstalk to go. We will be watching closely to find out. And with every big tournament, there are always card price changes, and this week was no different. The first card we're talking about is a card from Aether Drift called Stock Up. This is the equivalent of the uncommon that seems to appear in every set that starts cheap and then ends up spiking. It started at 50 cents, now it's $2.50. This is the latest in a long line of this. Think of Nowhere to Run, Heartfire Hero, This Town Ain't Big Enough. The reason for this is Wizards have generally printed more uncommons in each set now. So the pool of uncommons in each pack is bigger, therefore uncommons are a lot more scarce to get. And every set now we've been seeing an uncommon sort of spike out of nowhere as people scramble to try and find copies of it. Stock Up is appearing in control decks as a way to dig 5 cards. Even though it's sorcery speed, it turns out getting access to the top 5 cards of your deck and drawing 2 of them gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to find the answers you need to turn the game around. Outside of control, we're also seeing it in the Azorius Omniscience combo deck. This is a deck that tries to get Omniscience into the graveyard and immediately resurrect it with Abuelo's Awakening. This deck has always been about trying to draw as many cards as possible and discard the cards it needs to get the combo going, winning as early as turn 4, and Stock Up fits right into that deck really nicely. You might remember me last week mentioning players buying up Dockside Extortionist in anticipation of potential Commander unbans. Well, this spike has now translated to more banned cards in Hull Breacher and Primeval Titan. This is the same story as last week. These cards haven't been announced as going to be unbanned. However, people do want to speculate on them as 2 prime candidates that if they are unbanned, they will see play. I personally never got to play with Hull Breacher in Commander, but I can't say I expect Commander players to be excited for the child of Notion Thief and Smothering Tide to come back. Just outside looking in at a glance, it looks like a pretty egregious card to play against. I'm personally hoping it doesn't come back. In regards to Primeval Titan, similar story. This card I did get to experience. I'll be praying we don't see this one again, unless you're a player that really enjoys playing against Field of the Dead, because once Primeval Titan is back, Field of the Dead will be everywhere, and you'll have to play around that card. While we're mentioning the previous week's movements, Simulacrum Synthesizer continues to climb again. Last time I mentioned it seeing some experimentation in Standard. Well, this week, Commander players have discovered it fits very well into the new Energy Precon from Aether Drift. It's been picked up as one of the higher budget upgrades for the deck. This bad boy is now fetching for as much as $65. I think we're getting to the upper limit of how much I think we can pay for this card. It's a really powerful card, don't get me wrong, but $65 is definitely pushing it. I don't see this card getting a reprint anytime soon either, simply because it's a relatively recent card in a standard set that is still being printed. But if you're no holes barred looking for the best upgrade for some of your artifact decks, consider this one. The next card we're talking about is another card boosted by precons. This is a rare from Eldraine, Likeness Looter. It may appear to be a fairy, but do not be fooled. This card is an incredible upgrade in the zombie precon. Players have been using it as a premier discard outlet, being a 2-mana cheap flyer, and also having the ability to copy a lot of powerful zombie effects. We'll see if it can keep that price, but it's really interesting to see this card that has kind of been in the background, never really picking up play, pop up now, of all times, in a zombie deck. Lastly, the final card I wanted to talk about is one I had not heard of until I looked this one up, is Goblin Lord. I mentioned during spoilers how discard effects like Burning Inquiry would go really well with Marauding Marco and Monument to Endurance. Well, it turns out there's also cards like this one that for 2 mana let you discard 4 cards, not just 3, and draw 3. This plays absolutely perfectly with the 1-drop Marco. If you play Marco on 1 and then cast your Goblin Lore on turn 2, you can make that shark a 5/5, which is going to be an absolute powerhouse. That's it for this week's Upkeep. I really appreciate you tuning in. It's been another great week for this channel, seeing all this growth. I'm really excited to have you guys here, and again, if there's any content you'd like to see, let me know, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers!